welcome to tonight's evening event with Brookline Booksmith featuring Nick Offerman, Jeff Tweedy, and George Saunders for Where the Deer and the Antelope Play. My name is Alex Schaffner, and I'm the events director at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Massachusetts. Some of you are probably familiar with the store, in which case, welcome back. It's wonderful to have you back. If this is the first time that you are ever hearing of us, welcome. It is really lovely to have everybody as part of our community tonight. And every single person who's here has actively supported Nick and also an independent bookstore by buying a book to attend. And I say an independent bookstore, but we are now your independent bookstore. So thank you for being part of us. Tonight we have two special guests whom I would like to thank, first of all, for being here as well. Jeff Tweedy is the founding member and leader of the Grammy Award-winning American rock band Wilco, an incredibly accomplished musician and songwriter, and a wonderful writer, author of a memoir, Let's Go So We Can Get Back, and more recently of How to Write One Song. So it's wonderful to have him back on stage with us. George Saunders is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of 10 books, including Lincoln in the Bardo, which won the Man Booker Prize. Congratulations, by the way, 10th of December, a finalist for the National Book Award. The Brain Dead Megaphone and the critically acclaimed short story collections Civil War Land, In Bad Decline, Pastoralia, and In Persuasion Nation. He teaches the creative writing program at Syracuse University, and although the words instant classic are extremely overused, I think it's fair to say that at least a couple of his books can have them applied fairly, and I think the instant will go away after a while, but the books will remain. And finally, and most of all, I am excited to welcome Nick Offerman back to the Brookline Booksmith event series for the first time since 2015. Nick Offerman is the New York Times best-selling author of Paddle Your Own Canoe, One Man's Fundamentals for Delicious Living, Gumption, Relighting the Torch of Freedom with America's Gutsiest Troublemakers, and Good Clean Fun, Misadventures in Sawdust at Offerman Workshop, as well as co-author of The Greatest Love Story Ever Told with his wife, Megan Mullally. Nick and Megan live in Los Angeles, California, with their pups and a fairly decent collection of assorted wood clamps. Personally, as an appreciator of Lagavulin 16-year whiskey, as a person whose parents' basement contains 4 table saws and 2 drill presses and many other things, and as a person who only really calms down when everything smells like dirt and trees and water and sawdust, I'm thrilled to have him back. Today, it is a delight to hear him speak about the newest of his books, Where the Deer and the Antelope Play, the pastoral observations of one ignorant American who loves to walk outside. I just want to take a small pause right near the end here and say, the subtitle game is incredible. Nobody subtitles books like you. So thank you for that. In conclusion, it's especially pleasant to have him joined by the 2 people whose trip with him to Glacier National Park sparked the book itself. They have a lot they would like to talk about. We're going to have a pretty long event tonight, and we're all ready to hear it. So please, in your best Zoom way possible, give a warm and rowdy welcome to Nick Offerman, Jeff Tweedy, and George Saunders.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
I can feel it coming across the airwaves. Hi guys.
Hi.
Congratulations on the book, Nick.
I just feel like I just want to sit and like stare into your
I know. Let's just have one of our classic bromance jams. George, thank you. It seems to be going well so far. Since you held up the cover off the top, I just want to say an incredible woman named Vianne. Her last name is spelled Nguyen, and I haven't mastered a pronunciation yet. Somebody said something like when. But whatever it is, she's the artist that did this, and she did the illustrations inside. And I love designing the covers of my books. I usually have a photograph, but I'm just over the moon about this. It makes me so happy. It's based on sort of the chapbooks of the turn of the 20th century. And so I hope, if nothing else, everyone enjoys the colors of the cover, even if the inside puts you to sleep.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. I'm trying to find the picture of the 3 of us that's in here.
There's a good one at the very end of part 1.
Right, I'll find it.
I was on the road when my, oh, there we go. I was on the road when my hard copy came, so all my book is on pages that I printed out.
Thank you for being on tour and spreading your medicine to audiences once again.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Nick, I was telling Jeff that I actually have the Yeti that he bought me after the trip because my thermos was found wanting. So now I'm up with in the big leagues.
Was your thermos from like a bank or something?
It was literally like something that you get when you go for a shot or something. You just had a bunch of them laying on the table, and I just grab it.
But I talk about that in the book. It's a wonderfully practical way to live. Did it not hold water?
It did hold water. Yeah, it held water. Yeah.
That's Hemingway's water bottle.
Well,
I have a question I'd like to. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask. I was thinking about this and how, for me, there was an early experience of, grew up in Chicago, but there was an early experience of wilderness that kind of got it into my bloodstream. And I was wondering if there was a parallel thing for the two of you. Was there some early childhood thing where nature got in and then,
That's a great question. Jeff, do you have one off the top of your head?
No, not really. I really didn't spend a lot of time in any type of wilderness as a kid. I was like much more of a homebody. I mean, I think there was there fishing occasionally, but no hiking, no camping, anything like that. It was something I came to much later in life.
And beautifully so. My whole family, I have a wonderful big family, many of whom are farmers in the Minooka, Illinois region. And the whole family loves fishing, and we love boats. The guys, the farmers, all also have like ATVs and snowmobiles. And so farming itself, I grew up in a house that was heated by wood burning stoves. So my dad and I would often be out in the woods in the winter cutting up firewood. So there was a lot of outside time. And I remember very fondly and romantically, I guess nostalgically, being outside and really enjoying having, like, if you have the nice warm gear, then being outside is really fun when it's chilly out or inclement weather, especially then because we created civilization. So you get to enjoy being outside, chopping wood with your dad, but then there's like a thermos of hot chocolate, or there's you come back into mom and there's a bowl of chowder or something.
It's so funny because you kind of you relive that in the section about Rebanks where you went out and built a wall in the cold and came in and had some bean soup.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that section too. That's such a sensual. There's such a sensual piece of writing there. Like really, I don't know. It made me want to be cold and then find someplace warm.
Good. That was my intent, because I really love. I used to love when I would work like as a carpenter. If I could, the longer I could wait for lunch, or the longer I could wait to like get a drink, the more delicious and satisfying that treat would be. So I guess that's a simple human pleasure that I'd like to pass along. And there's nothing better to fulfill the ending of it with than bean soup, preferably in the region of Cumbria, England.
I had a best friend growing up. I don't know. This just came into my mind when you were asking about where the outdoors fits into her childhood. I had a best friend until he was like, I don't know, we were about 4 or 5 or 5 or 6, and he moved away because his family moved out to a family farm, and he became, a farmer. His dad started taking over the family farm. So years later, my parents thought it would be a great idea to reunite me with my childhood friend. So they had me go out to the farm to spend the night with my friend Rusty, and we were going to camp out in the yard. And all I remember is making a big enough stink somehow with this farm family for them to run an extension cord and a small TV set out to the tent so I could watch Midnight Special on because or Don Kirshner's rock concert or something like that, because that's where my head always was. But yeah, that's my memory of camping.
That checks out.
That's really good.
When you guys, I know you both have read through at least the first third of the book. Did anything occur to you? Well, you know, Jeff, I've been asked a few times now about my representation of your heroics and my recounting of your heroics. So, in the final reckoning, how did you feel? How did I do?
Well, if I'm in the character of the Jeff Tweedy in the book, I don't think you did nearly enough to capture
Damn it.
the scope of what I accomplished.
The daring, really. I don't think scope. It was just these are the glasses, and if you, these would be here right now.
He probably wouldn't have been able to find his computer.
No, they'd be in the drink in Montana somewhere.
Are those the actual glasses?
Yeah, they're the actual. I'll never pick sanctified objects as far as I'm concerned.
Folks, I don't know if you can, I'm not super good at computers, but if you can get a screenshot of George's glasses, you'll want to have that on hand as you get
read the book.
Later part of part one. Those are legendary glasses.
Yes.
It did. I will say this. It did make me worry that all of the times on the trip that I spent joking about how heroic I was, that I really, really did for a second think, maybe they didn't know I was joking.
No.
Well, I thought that was one of the most fun thing on that trip is that we get into that shtick and we never break it. You know, really fun. That was really fun.
It was a great shtick, and it reminded me of when you're on a road trip with your siblings and one of them's really funny, and because you can milk a riff for a long time, and we did.
Oh yeah.
I feel like your glasses should get some sort of name like Thor's hammer.
I'm going to think about that one. I thought Rudy was the first thing that came to mind, but that doesn't really do it. Rudy the glasses. I don't know.
Well, if you need any more indication of how long the shtick lasted later in the book, when you come to visit us in Chicago, it's still pretty much in full swing.
Yeah, and we didn't have to explain it to everybody. We slipped into it, and everyone knew exactly. They're like, okay, it's still going.
Yeah. Oh, Susie had already heard endlessly about. I don't know. I mean, the trip really would have been a disaster.
Well, it would. That's actually true. I didn't have any backup, so that would have been like you guys and Mr. Magoo. But you know, it's funny because it was part of the beauty of that whole trip for me was that, you know, you go on an extended trip with two people that you admire, but have never really spent an extended amount of time with, and it's a little nerve-wracking. You want it to go well, and it was so much fun, and I felt like it's just, you know, dropped right into kind of like boyhood honesty, and it was really, and that moment was part of it. It was really fun.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and it's interesting because it never occurred to me. Like, I feel like when the three of us became friends, that was kind of the natural progression was, well, we got to get out and hang out in the woods sometimes. Like, in hindsight, writing it up, I'm fascinated that we all three separately met each other in 3 different meetings in the year 2014. And I remember kind of then reporting to each other, like, oh, we have these 3-way, and we kind of immediately started reporting. I wonder actually when our text thread started, because we started operating as a threesome pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was like assembling a team.
Yeah, like the A-team.
But
you
always, what's that?
We need a mid-list author, pronto.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad we don't have to split a rent 3 ways, like an $80 rent 3 ways. That would, I've tried that before.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Wasn't your solution that you got a 4th roommate so you wouldn't have
that's
to?
that's how we figured it out. But the thing you always say, Nick, and I would always find really interesting is you always describe yourself as, I think technically you are the youngest, but I always feel like I'm the youngest, and maybe it's because I'm the baby of my family or something like that. But I always feel like I'm in the presence of real men when I hang out with you two, and you seem to have a lot more. I seem to be a lot more insulated, I feel like.
I feel that same way though, that like you guys are the real deals, and so.
Well, we've talked about this, that we all 3 have some version of imposter syndrome within our threesome, and I feel like I think I say in the book that I feel like I'm thrilled to get to ride in the back seat of the Trans Am with you guys while you're plugging in 8 tracks of Frank Zappa and Foghat. And that part is true. You guys know a lot more about music generally than me, and so I'm always learning about contemporary and past bands, especially music of the 70s. But Jeff, I look up to you because you've been such a practical professional for so long. Like, I don't know, and for me, my career path has been such a weird bumbling as an actor, where it's like, I was in my well into my 30s before I started really making a living as an actor, and so meeting you and your family, and then getting to hang out with Wilco and kind of seeing the operation, and knowing that you've been developing that over a couple and a half decades. That's where my admiration comes in, where I'm like, oh man, you've been doing this right for a really long time.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's really sweet. When I think of you though, Nick, I think of my among other things that I love about you. I feel like my neighbor Erwin, who is the person that my wife calls if something goes wrong in our house. I feel like you have a lot more Erwin in you than I'll ever have, and so that makes me feel I don't know, like I guess like the kid in the back seat, like being. So don't put your hand on that, Jeff. You're gonna hurt yourself.
That's
one of the things that really excited me from the beginning was the chance to kind of, like casually interview you guys about how, I'm just interested in how art gets made and how careers get sustained. And that moment when somebody who's good at something distinguishes himself from the person who's okay at it. You're just at that maybe intuitive instance or whatever it takes. And so it's so nice to be able to talk to people in different fields and kind of try to triangulate, like, what is it that makes, a work of art happen, and it's not, as we all know, it's not linear or analytical or intellectual. It's something above and beyond that. So it's been really a real pleasure to be able to talk really frankly to you guys about that and in all kinds of situations.
Well, I think that that's the mutual draw, is that we allow we can be vulnerable with each other and with the misgivings of the art that we create. We can talk about what we get wrong more probably than what we get right, and know that that's part of our process, and that that often we discover that some of what we get wrong are the most beautiful examples of our personalities or our voice, and so it's a wonderful sort of phone tree of bouncing things off of each other. Specifically, I think I love this little tidbit, but well, actually, you're both involved. There's a lot of Wendell Berry in this book. I mean, anytime if you've had a conversation with me for more than 5 minutes, you've heard a lot about Wendell Berry. And when I interviewed both of you to lionize you as people I look up to in my second book called Gumption, at some point, George, you let me know that you had set a Wendell Berry poem to music, and you shared it with me, and it was heartbreakingly beautiful. And you let me record it for the end of my audiobook of Gumption, and Wendell Berry was also someone that I interviewed for the book. So it was a wonderful sort of serendipity, all kinds of chocolate getting dipped in peanut butter across the board. And then I had the crazy, a similar situation with you, Jeff, where you and Spencer, your son, who's an incredibly talented drummer, we all kind of sat around and made up some woodworking songs for the audio book of my next book, Good Clean Fun. And in both instances, because people don't know this about George, that you initially, when you were young, you for a while you thought you were going to be an amazing guitarist. That was your plan, right?
I did think that, yeah.
And you, I mean, you are a very
You're an amazing guitar player.
talented guitar player, and you also write music. But so what you sent me, the Wendell Berry thing, was so pretty, and then it's so clumsy. Then when I make my own iteration of it, and the same thing with Jeff. The worst thing about recording these songs, which is such a dream, recording in the Wilco Loft in Chicago. But Jeff, I would bring in the lyrics, and Jeff's such a human jukebox where he'd be like, well, how about this crazy, beautiful melody? And I'd say, okay, I think that's fine with me. And then Jeff would lay down a scratch track of the vocal for me to then listen to and sing along to. So I had to listen to like my favorite singer of my adulthood singing my words and then replace them by anyone's favorite singer voice. But people keep telling me that it sounds like authenticity, and that's what they appreciate.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned from getting to know you guys, because I actually, I remember sitting at home watching the Parks and Rec episode, Jeff, that you were in, and just like, shit, why can't I be friends with those guys? So when I did meet you, what was so interesting and kind of, I don't know why, but surprising is the extent of gratitude that you both have for your success. I thought that was so sweet, that, from my outside point of view, these people who had long ago made it and were operating on this world stage, still in person, were kind of like a little bit shocked that it happened, and still in doing new stuff would always have a really reverent attitude toward it. Like there was no sense of, oh yeah, I'll just phone that one in. Always a kind of realization that that each song or each show was the first, and I thought that was really inspiring. And I got a little taste of that because when Lincoln and the Bardo was coming out, I just nervously said, hey, Jeff, do you have anything we could use at the beginning? And you're like, yeah. And then like a day later, that beautiful thing arrived, that great, it's like the generosity is just, really, really wonderful. So thank you.
Well, I just, the only thing that makes me feel good about getting to do this is like a constant process of earning it. I think I like feeling like I can get better, and I want to get better, and I try and stay focused on the part that made me feel like I don't know, that a week ago I couldn't do this and now I can do this on the guitar. Or I don't know, this part of what I do is a little bit easier than it was a year ago or something. That aside, that along with just kind of feeling like the main job is to be respectful and protective of inspiration. Mm-hmm. that part is like, that feels like that's your main job, I think, is. And but the thing that when I think of you two, I think every single thing that you've done, George, and everything that you do, Nick, from even your woodworking through your books to wherever I see you appear, there's a really unique you-ness to that comes through in all of those things. And same with you, George. It doesn't matter to me if you're writing about something that's more sci-fi or something that's more, rooted in the suburbs or everything. There's a Georgeness to, I don't know, the way I feel it. I feel that part of it more than any other part. And I don't know if that's the part that distinguishes, like, somebody being really good and somebody being comfortable being themselves to a degree that it maybe resonates outside of that circle of just being good or something. I don't know.
I see that in my students, that when they really start hitting it, there's suddenly a union between the person that you know and the person on the page. You can feel like maybe early there's a kind of an attempt to be somebody else. And then that gets frustrating. At a certain moment, you go, oh, I see you. I see the person I know on the That's really a trick. That's
which is one of the really lovely things about you putting another book out into the world, Nick. I like been rereading it on this trip, and I always feel you. I get to spend more time with you, and it's like, I don't know if that's easy for everybody to do, to have themselves come through so clearly and their prose, or basically, I think everything you do.
Yeah, I don't think it's easy at all. And that was true, actually, in Jeff, in your book, the same thing is, as soon as I was reading and I'm like, oh, he's right here. He's the guy that I know is right on. Can I just ask one quick question? I think we should mention, I want to ask you, Jeff, for a second, and Nick, about your experience. Remember when Jeff had that incredible burst of a song a day at the pandemic? That was crazy. Oh my God.
That was crazy. And before we dive into it, let me just say thank you to you both for the nice things you just said. That was very nice. But yes, I mean, that's the crazy, like, I feel bad. It's like when we've all three had the good fortune to be in circumstances in our lives where we can tell extremely name-droppy stories with some frequency. We just, our fortunate paths land us in, rubbing elbows with hot shots of one sort or another. And the story of Jeff doing that, I feel bad whenever I begin to tell someone about it, because it's so ridiculous. We're both huge fans of your music and your songwriting. And so to be on a three-way text thread where damn near every day, or at least every other day, early on in the pandemic, you were dropping a new song.
Yeah. I felt like there was some kind of, there was that early moment when people thought, oh, this will be over soon. And then it seemed to me in my memory that right about the time we realized it wouldn't be over soon, and there was a lot of that panic, like nervous laughter across the whole country, Jeff kind of switched on. And I was just watching that with amazement, because every night about 5 o'clock, there'd come a file and I'd be like, come on, how good could it be? And you listen to it, and then now take a month off, then another. So it was, for me, it was really, I'm always thinking about creativity. And I heard Linda Berry say once that one theory is you're creative in a fashion that sort of echoes the way you played as a kid. So if you're managed and controlled and interrupted a lot, then you self-interrupt. Or, I know sometimes what I'll do is I'll have something go well in writing and get a feeling of guilt. Like I have to stop now, not be have too much hubris. And that's a bad tendency. And with Jeff, I was just like, wow, that creative well it just seems sort of infinite. It was very inspiring.
I think that I'm very, if that makes sense to me, and I love Linda Berry, and I've learned a lot from her books. And but I've always been very comfortable with solitude and isolation, to use a maybe starker word for it. Um, I, when I was a little kid, if I said I'm lonely or I'm bored, my mom wouldn't say, go call Toby. She taught me how to play solitaire. Like, so she didn't want me to leave. She didn't want me to leave the house, or she was like, here's a deck of cards. Here's how to play solitaire. So I think that solitaire wasn't going to satisfy me for very long. So, but yeah, so anytime there's some situation where I feel like it turns into something that feels like a deprivation for other people, it almost feels more comfortable for me. And that I definitely felt that. I almost felt guilty about it at the beginning of the pandemic, to be honest. But it's also part of, like, I think what we all, to do all of the different things that we do, it grows out of a certain amount of discipline or practice too. You write a little bit every day, whether you think you do or not, and if you do that, they're much more inclined to have stuff. I don't know. Things end up getting finished, I guess.
Yeah. The muse likes to find you at your desk. I think that's what somebody said.
Yeah, that's more succinct. Yeah, for sure.
I make faces every day.
What's that, Nick?
I make a few funny faces every day.
I'll tell you this. I learned a lot sharing songs like that with you two, because one of the things that can be really daunting about having a creative impulse and wanting to make a song a day, or like write all the time, is like you don't want to do it in isolation. You don't want to feel like you're doing it for no reason. And just having a couple of people that I love and feel comfortable with, to get to share it in the same spirit that it was being created, I think reconnected me with a lot of, like, why I love making up songs. I want a new song to sing every day. I love having a new song to sing, and when I love having my friends to sing it to, and that's, honest to God, like the most satisfying part of everything. Else is kind of crazy to focus on, like how the world's gonna perceive it, or how many records it's gonna sell, or all the other things.
Yeah.
I can't focus on that.
Well, start doing it again then. We'll be waiting for one tonight.
I did do it at the beginning of this year but not with you guys. I did it on a text thread with the guys in Moco, and I did it for 50 days.
Wow.
And those are the songs we're recording right now.
Wow. Well, that's depressing. Thanks a lot.
It's not. You gotta write 50 songs to find 5 good ones. So.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, can I ask you, like, this is, I mean, it's in the book, but if you could compare the way you felt about Wilderness at the beginning and then the way you felt at the end, what was the big sort of like spiritual or ethical takeaway from that amazing 3-part experience that you described?
Well, that's a great question, because that was kind of the thesis of the book. It's an idea that I had when I first read Wendell Berry stories in my 20s. It really flipped a switch in me that just had to do with, like, oh, right, he's got this farmer's common sense of watching the world speed up and be obsessed with consumerism, and saying, whoa, hang on a second, you guys, like, you're all buying Twinkies hand over fist and eating like McDonald's. This is not going to end well. Like, you're no one is literally, no one is minding the farm, and that's not what Mother Nature appreciates. And so when as you'll find in the book, to the audience, in the introduction, I was with my mom and dad having lunch with Wendell and his family, and I was talking about this book idea, and he said, look at nature through the point of view of Aldo Leopold rather than John Muir. John Muir is a sort of Teddy Roosevelt era, like, you know, he's the guy who we attribute a lot of our conservation, and the national parks were kind of his big idea. And he's, you know, considered a heroic sort of Thoreau, Emerson kind of figure. But when we think about nature and wilderness, to address your question, in the Muir sensibility, when I hear conservation sort of in the history of my life, I think of Muir and Yosemite and like Greenpeace and like big ticket headline, you know, nature's greatest hits, or as Teddy Roosevelt called them, our crown jewels. And almost immediately on our trip, and we had this wonderfully educated guide named John, who was as we're hiking these trails, he was talking about the Blackfeet nation that used to inhabit, and that was, you know, as we raped and pillaged and committed genocide against the tribes all over this country, they were the ones in that area that we basically shoved out of the acreage so that we could make it into a beautiful park. Suddenly, everything, you know, looked had a different bit of like sepia filter, where it was like, oh, I can see the shining taking place here all of a sudden. And so it put things in perspective. Whereas then by the end of the book and the thought process, Aldo Leopold, who was based in Madison, Wisconsin, was much more of an experimental agrarian, where he understood, instead of like singling out works of nature to hold up, put on a pedestal, he understood that we're all cogs and wheels in the great mechanism of Mother Nature, and that it all has to be revered and worshipped and studied, even if we don't know what it's good for. So if you, for example, you know, in the book I cite Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and she talks about a lake in California. It's all about the effects of DDT on nature back in the 50s and 60s. And mankind tries to wipe out a gnat. They're like, you know what, these gnats are terrible. Let's use this great new poison and kill off this year's gnat crop. So they spray the lake, the poison soaks into the lake, and the plankton eat the poison, they die. Then the fish eat the plankton, it concentrates in the fish, they all die. Then the birds eat the fish, it concentrates further in the birds, they all die. And then the next spring, the gnats are back healthier than ever. And so it took my sensibility of wilderness from a consumer point of view, where I thought of it more like a theme park or something you go visit and ooh and ah at. And it brought it home to my backyard and the birds and my watershed, and understanding that we all have a responsibility to pay attention to where our food comes from and how everybody's treating our natural resources. So I guess that's what it did. It made it much more present and local.
Beautiful. I remember in reading one of Wendell books, he describes the way that the native people made a trail, and then the settlers came in and made it, you know, wider with more violence and all drunk. And that was a beautiful kind of poetic metaphor for the two different ways of approaching it. And that's nice. Yeah.
That's it exactly. And we, you know, it makes me think about knowing where our food comes from, and therefore what goes into our food, and therefore if it's healthy or not for us, for the animals, for the plants, you know, for the watershed. It makes me think of everything, all of the corporate interests to whom we give our money. There's this tacit idea of like, here, electric company, here's my money. I assume you're going to be cool, right? Like, I know I'm going to be able to turn on my lights, and you're going to take coal out of a mountain. You're not going to be a dick to the mountain.
No, we wouldn't do that. No,
it's all good. Right. And so, you know, we've learned the folly of that sensibility and the sort of blithe laziness where we just happily turn on our lights and use our electricity and all of our other products when the answer to, I think, a lot of the problems of our civilization lie in reawakening ourselves to pay attention to who is sourcing all that stuff and how and why.
Right. Wonderful. And good for you for putting all those ideas in such a entertaining, lovely format. It's really a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I think that's my bag, because I'm not a journalist, and I'm not, a super deep thinker or like student of any particular subject, but I love this subject matter, and I love trying to regurgitate it for my readership with a smile, where it's like, look, we're all stupid, but sit down, pull up a chair, and have a lemonade or a root beer, and let me tell you about Rachel Carson.
Yeah, I think it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to go out into the world, explore your passions, and report back. And that's I think that early on, when we were talking about the book before it was finished, we were worried about a certain amount of moralizing coming across as just that. But I feel like you sidestepped that completely, personally.
Well, I appreciate that. The writers I look up to, including you two, do a pretty good job. I feel like I can't, in a weak or youthful way, I can't resist calling Governor Greg Abbott of Texas a piece of shit. And so it's things like, actually, I take that. I think I call him a shit bag, to be accurate. And so I was like, that's a little strident. That's going to be a turnoff for some readers. But thankfully, then he did 3 even worse things that week. I was like, no, factually, you can't deny this statement.
Just call him like you see him.
I'm covered, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just following the chats here. Somebody says it's objectively true, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just it. That's something that I really appreciate in reading Wendell Berry, is his ability to reason things out. Like, I've really enjoyed him completely giving somebody an ass whooping in an essay, in like an essay response, but he never has to resort to calling them names, because he simply picks apart their logic piece by piece.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say I'm youthful, or there's a weakness to my writing, because I just don't have time to be to pursue that wisdom. So I have to just say, okay, let's just say this guy's an asswipe. That said, this A, B, and C.
Well, there's no logic, or there's no reason to be picked apart in some of these cases. I think that's part of the impulse to call him a name, is because there's really no rational argument to be made. We're not like, there doesn't appear to be a lot of thought that you can actually walk through.
I've read that I can't remember the essay, but a really interesting essay about how once the powers that be have rejected, and they call it Enlightenment values, then the usual rhetorical tools like satire and logic don't actually work. That they're kind of like, they already gave up on that, and so they're in a domain of just grabbing power. So then,
is that all you got, nerd?
Yeah.
It's a great point, and something else that gave me solace was Rebecca Solnit had a wonderfully elegant version of me calling them shitbags, and she said, specifically, when they made it illegal, to have any sort of mandate at schools or public places. And she said, so basically Texas has made it illegal to care about the health of the community. If you're like, we should have this medicine because that's the communal health, you're now a radical if you think that in Texas. So I mean, I was like, listen, Rebecca, that's very well stated, but I can wrap it up a lot more quickly.
Yeah. I think about this idea of like Muir and Leopold. I heard this Zen teacher one time talking about, I think he was actually talking about abortion, but the idea was that the real error that human beings make is to pick a side and then pretend that if they do that thing, there's no inherent karma in it. So like if you choose to do something and recognize the consequences, then you're good. But it seems to me like what we've done in America is we've done these things like you were describing, Nick, turn on the power, solve everything with sort of aggression and so on. And then we act as if there's no blowback. And I think that's maybe where we're finding ourselves now, is that the blowback is coming for all kinds of, racism and inequity and the whole thing. And now we have to see if we're honest enough to accept the consequences.
Yeah, it's a great point, and that's kind of at the root of Aldo Leopold's thinking, which was simply that when you break it down on his farm, we truly are all inexplicably connected. We all, are the same batch of molecules. The three of us may end up a redwood tree, or we may end up an ocean liner or an asteroid, and it doesn't just have to do with animals and plants and soil and weather and watershed. It also has to do, you can then zero in on how are the squirrels treating these peanuts, and how are these Caucasians treating these people of color? How are these males treating these females? All of that demands the same reverence and respect. We're all part of the same great economy, as it were,
Right. Beautiful. Yeah.
Since for those who haven't read the book, obviously, Wendell Berry has this great essay called "The Two Economies," and I believe that's the title of the essay. And basically, when you hear the economy, it's such a buzzword for like the Wall Street economy, and it's crazy making when the government or the media says like the economy's doing great or the economy is taking a shit. There's talking about very specifically the people who make money on Wall Street are doing good or bad. That's what they're saying. And the vast majority of the population of the planet are like, they said the economy's doing great, but I just got evicted from my house, like that. And so Wendell Berry talks about the great economy, which is the economy of which we're all a part, all of creation, Mother Nature's Rube Goldberg machine. And so that's kind of that's the light bulb that went off when I first read Wendell, was like, oh yeah, we need to pay a lot more attention to that economy, and much less to how many athletic shoes we own.
Yeah, fact, the real costs. Right. Yeah. Well, looks like we have a ton of questions. If you want to.
I think I lost
I
you guys for a second.
Oh, hello. It's me, Nick. I saw a question go by asking about the name of our Airstream, and it was with great pleasure, and it came pretty quickly. Megan usually names things. She usually picks things because she has the taste in the household, and I'm a very lucky beneficiary of that taste. But it occurred to me when the Airstream showed up at our house and she started outfitting it with rugs and the most amazing like bed linens and so forth. I'm a huge fan of Patrick O'Brian's seafaring novels, of which there are 21, the Aubrey Maturin novels from the Victorian age of Her Majesty's Royal Navy. And one of those novels is called The Nutmeg of Consolation. And it was a cute little ship that Jack Aubrey captained for a brief time. So I named our Airstream The Nutmeg of Consolation. And
that's nice.
She has proven to be worthy of the name.
I like that.
You both ended up acquiring mobile abodes
Yeah.
during this last, say, 18 months or so, and I'm incredibly jealous. But I guess I get to do it. I get to rent one every once in a while. That's where I am right now. But I don't know. I love that you both did that.
Yeah, we took ours and then drove it across to New York and then got stuck there for the winter. And so that was like our kind of daily vehicle. So we just kind of stopped driving. It was just that one. Just kind of stayed in the house the whole winter. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Good question. I don't know if this would be a good one or not, but someone wants to know if we can talk about fan encounters during our hike. That?
Gosh. Well, it's interesting. I mean, the thing that springs to mind is a couple of fan encounters in the book that come during the pandemic, which were very different because I was able to be masked. Even out on trails, I always erred on the side of safety. So like, if I was approaching people, it would depend. Like if you're on a trail where you had to pass people, generally everybody would be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And then we'd like throw a mask on and kind of
Mhm.
shrug as we passed each other because it was like, might as well.
Mhm.
But I feel like when the three of us were together, if memory serves, people would sometimes recognize one of us.
Yo.
What? And then the other two would chime in and be like, "Well, actually, uh, these two guys, you would actually love their book."
No, I can tell you a story. I remember being at dinner one night and the waitress recognized Nick. And then we said, and this is Jeff Tweedy. And she went, "Oh my God, from Wilco." And then Nick very nice said, "And this is George Saunders. He's a writer." And she kind of went, "That must be great. You must enjoy that."
Oh, good for you, honey.
Good for you. I hope it pays off someday.
Yeah, it's such a funny thing because that's part of what makes me feel like I'm in the back seat because my medium is perhaps the most pedestrian. Like I'm the Twinkie of the three of us, uh, and and so I always, whenever we get that reaction, I always want to say, if you like my work and Jeff's work, you should read some
And they go, yeah, yeah,
Saunders stories.
sure.
I remember being on the trail one day in Glacier, and this was pretty annoying. We got past a group of people. We were maybe 100 yards past them, and somebody went, "Ron Swanson!" Remember that? And they would be like, in like, just to see if you'd turn around or something like that. That's pretty cowardly.
Yeah, that's the downside, and that's a weird part is like there's a unlike you two, there's a pretty large contingent, especially in the Parks and Rec was on for 7 years, and so it started to get popular a couple years in, and so from like 2010 to 2015, uh, people would know. Most people would know the name Ron Swanson, but wouldn't know the name of the actors who played the parts. And so I got a lot of stuff like shouted across the street, like in New York City, where people are like, "Bacon and eggs." I like fishing. It's like yoga, but I get to kill something. Like they would shoot. Give me all the bacon and eggs you have. Or I'd be like, eh. And it reminded me of he's in the news right now. I was doing a movie with William Shatner many years ago, which since neither of you jumped in, I'll say it was Miss Congeniality 2, Armed and Fabulous.
I knew that.
I'm sure it was on the tip of your tongue. And I was one of the bad guys, and we kidnapped Shatner, and we were driving to set in Vegas, on the outskirts of Las Vegas, and we pulled into a gas station, and somebody shouted, "Captain Kirk." They just shouted Captain Kirk. And William Shatner put down his window and shouted, "Go fuck yourself." I was like, all right. I guess you probably had enough of that.
You earned that.
Yeah, I
Hey,
I did get recognized as Scott Tanner the other day
That's pretty good.
that's
from
good.
the Parks and Rec. Yeah.
That's gratifying.
Hey, I'm seeing several questions that are about Nick. Would you recommend 2 or 3 of the top Wendell Berry books if someone hasn't read them, and where should they start?
Thank you. That's a great question. I started with short stories. So here's your choices. You have poetry, fiction, and essays. Somebody gave me a couple books of short stories. The first one was called Fidelity, and it's amazing. And his whole body of work, which is a bunch of short stories and novels, all are about one community over a few generations in Kentucky, this fictional community. So wherever you start with this fiction, you can just keep filling it in with all the stories and novels. It's a beautiful body of work. His essays, which is probably his biggest, those are like, his sympathy for the devil when he goes on tour. The book that came out in 1976 called The Unsettling of America is kind of his biggest hit. And it's an incredible set of essays, rife with this sort of common sense that we're talking about. He has a wonderful essay called Caught in the Middle or Stuck in the Middle, where it's only about 10 or 15 years old, where he used to have sort of a biblically based pro-life stance about abortion. And in this essay, he is very funny, making fun of same-sex legislation, where he suggests that maybe governments should have a stamp to stamp the rumps of people that are allowed to legally copulate. But then he proceeds to reason himself from a biblically based pro-life stance to saying, I've thought about it, and you really can't have any regulation about abortion. Like the only empathetic thing to do is take care of everybody with whatever they choose and need. These women, choose and need for their bodies. And I was so powerfully moved because it was always a bummer early on where I was like, I love this amazing writer, but he has this one wrong stance. But then he fixed it. And so his essays are incredible. And then the poetry, you name it. There's a book called The Timbered Choir. There's one called The Long-Legged House. But I mean, it's all just gorgeous. But there's some titles to start with.
Yeah, I think that poem, "The Wild Rose," that you sang, that's a beautiful anniversary or marriage poem. That just incredible. Yeah,
it is. His poem in the Piece of Wild Things is kind of a greatest hit. You can look that up and let that be your springboard.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of questions about that. Yeah. Well, let's see.
Since we had that question, I'll tell the anecdote of I was hiking by myself just in January of this year in Big Bend National Park down on the southern Texas border along the Rio Grande, and I was having a wonderful time, but I was missing Jeff and George, because when I hike in national parks, it's like it's with these guys. And I was thinking about them, and I was absolutely being sentimental and like missing you guys, and so I listened to one of the songs from Jeff's famous song cycle that we were lionizing, that George contributed to, because Jeff opened the lyrics up in our text thread, and I was driving or something. I missed the whole thing, and it was just probably for the best, because I would have had to be let down gently. But so George got to kind of contribute to the lyrics. So the song, which is called "A Robin or a Wren," is credited to Jeff and George. And so I put that specific song on, and it's really pretty. And it's lovely to think about your friends to this song. And so then so that's what I was out in the middle of this all day hike, and it was like really enjoyable and kind of nostalgic. And I just begun leaving a voice memo that I was going to send to Jeff and George. And this guy, I hadn't seen anybody for hours. This guy comes around like a rock corner, and literally his opener was like, "What's up, Nick?" And just so weird and disarming, because I immediately then had to do the math where I was like, okay, I don't know you. You must have heard my voice and recognized it. But that was just weird. I'm friendly, and I was like, hello. And his second statement was, I love Wilco. I've seen Jeff a million times in concert. And I still had the voice memo going. And I was like, oh, hey, how about the celebrated fiction of George Saunders? And he was like, no, I don't really
Not much of a
books much. And I was like, oh man. And I think he could tell that it would have been great if he had known something of George's to
Or
reference.
if you could have lied a little bit, would have been great too. Just a little, you know.
He totally
That should be a bonus track on the audiobook of this.
It was
really funny.
It was pretty crazy.
Yeah. I still have that recording actually.
So do I. I listen to it often.
It was a beautiful day, and I didn't know at the time that it was gonna. The one enjoyable thing about this book is the way I had the idea for the book for years before Wendell gave me the inciting question of John Muir versus Aldo Leopold. And I should say, by the way, thank you, Jeff. Jeff and I were playing a show at Largo in Los Angeles, probably on or about New Year's Eve, going into 2019. And you said, hey, why don't you and me and George go walk somewhere nice, and we can have the kind of conversations we have, and you can use that stuff for your book. So I'll be arranging your cut with your.
Yeah.
I was just trying to, I don't know, just to think of any excuse we could come up with to get together.
Well, it worked. It worked like gangbusters, and I mean that's something that I really relish about our friendship is that we're all lucky enough to be really busy, and we hustle. Like we all tour kind of around the world one way or another for our different jobs. And it seems, in hindsight, I'm pretty impressed that we were able to, in the early part of a year say, okay, how about this week in July, and pull it off. It means we were all really, I think, craving some quiet walking time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we got to do it again.
Yeah, we are due. We had our second one lined up, and then the pandemic.
I think Nick pretty much paid for that first one, so I don't know. I think we might have to go to Peoria National Park if it's on my tab.
They've got 7 kinds of maples in that park.
Yeah.
The Indiana
it's a different
Dunes.
one. It's a different one. Just a Dunkin' Donuts and a Wendy's, but berm with some oaks.
The nice thing is, if we did that, we would have probably just as much fun. I think that's something that attracts us to each other is our attachment. We've never lost our working class sensibility.
I was going to suggest that we don't go somewhere that's quite as steep.
There's slip, trip, and fall hazards all over that damn place.
I don't mind elevation. I don't mind walking uphill. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just saying that I really could have died. I think I really would have done.
Yeah,
not to find a point on it, but
this is all described in the book. But Jeff had a real tumble during that trip. Yeah.
He did, and I always feel quick to point out defensively that it easily could have been any one of us. It was the kind of slip where we all looked at it and were like, this could go one of two ways. And
Yeah.
then Jeff went out there first.
Yeah.
It was like, yep, there was that one, that was the other way.
And suddenly we were off the hook. It couldn't happen to us then. It was like you were a sin eater.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
took one
it's,
for the team. You took two for the team.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like we had went across that same part of the path earlier in the day before it had gotten quite as slick because I guess the sun, came out a little bit. So I think that's covered in the book. But
It is.
But I will say one of the things that was really lovely about that is that that had to hurt, and you were so sweet about it, and you just instantly were joking about it, which is I think is some character to be in pain and still be thinking about the comfort of the other people. That was.
Oh yeah, no, like that's I think that's very Midwestern. I think that.
This spike through my head? No, I love it. That's a coat rack.
It's just a flesh wound.
Yeah.
Is the refrain.
No, I find myself I always apologize when I'm in pain.
It's easy to do. You don't want to ruin the good time.
Right, exactly. And it was such a good time that that was I think I really was.
Uh-oh.
We're just looking through the questions here.
At least it's a cute freeze frame.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks good.
Do you all
There he goes.
There was two that I liked. Jeff, you froze for a minute, but welcome back. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
There was one. I guess let's quickly. I liked this question. Somebody said they heard how Jeff and George met, but let's recount. So I'll say, Jeff, I had the great, esteemed, crazy pleasure, and it was we were doing this episode of Parks and Rec, and we needed this local rock star, Scott Tanner, and it was the late great, sorely missed writer Harris Whittles, who was a wonderful comedian and writer on Parks and Rec, and it was his idea because he knew that the proprietor of Largo, Mark Flanagan, he literally could get you lunch with the Queen of England like next week. He knows everybody, and so Harris through Largo was like, what about Jeff Tweedy? And I was like, wait, what? Because I was such a crazy fan, but also I was directing the episode, and so I got to pick, or I got a strong voice in the choice, and so Jeff, how did it go when we came to you when you heard we wanted you to be on the show?
Well, this is something I took up with the writers when I visited and said hello to everybody in the writers' room. Was they presented it to me that they needed a washed-up rock star, and I was the first one that they thought of.
I mean, I get that. I understand that a lot. Where they're like, because you get a casting breakdown when they're casting roles, and so you get to read what they think of you, basically. And I get tons of 2-sentence descriptions that are like, 40 pounds past linebacker, often found crying in the mirror in his and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's what I said. That's what when I got the news that I was being asked to do this, I said to Susie, they want me to play a guy that was in a rock band, but it's kind of past his prime and just still living in the community. And she was like, oh my God, how would you ever be able to do that? You're not an actor. But no, the thing I remember about the first day on the set, or like within minutes of meeting you, Nick, is you walked up to me and you said, "You have beautiful eyes."
Well, there you have it.
And I was fine from that point on. The rest, I'm assuming I'm still eligible for an Emmy or something. Do they do Emmys?
I think so. Yeah,
Still
they're
for-
still they're working up a 4-year consideration campaign. But I mean, you were great on the show. You came back and did a couple more episodes and played the Unity
Landho.
concert
Yeah.
with your band Landho. But the thing that I love about our meeting is that pretty quickly we hugged, and it pretty quickly it became clear, like, oh, let's stay together. And then George, I totally solicited you through, like, my editor emailed your editor, and you were just one of the people I wanted to lionize and talk about in my book Gumption. And you agreed to meet with me, and we met on a cold day near Central Park in New York. And first thing you did was walked up and gave me a big hug. And I just thought, I was coming to meet, someone who I was kind of starstruck with. And so with both of you, that being the case, I just immediately was like, oh, wow. I think we're about to be friends forever.
Yeah. That was a great day. We were walking around for about 6 hours, I think, just talking, and ended up in like Tavern on the Green or something. And that was just a magical thing.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. We had like steak and beer for lunch.
Yeah.
Which is a rare treat in my house.
Yeah. And then I think Jeff and I we were both invited to that incredible Colbert finale. And I drove up from Syracuse, and it was really nerve-wracking because, that everywhere you looked, there was somebody that you recognized, including Big Bird, I think, was there, which was, that was a tough.
Right.
And then I was sitting there, and I looked out a door, and I really came there to meet you. That was like you pushy, I tried to meet Jeff Tweedy, and I looked out a door, and you were kind of looking in. I think Sammy was with you, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at you and me, and we hugged, and I just said, and at some point we both said, let's just skip the shit and just be friends. Like, okay.
I said, we have to be pals now.
Yeah. It was really.
But I remember there was Cookie Monster and Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, literally, and Barry Manilow and Cyndi Lauper. It was like.
I was like, it takes all kinds, like Muppets and war criminals and.
But then you really proved your friendship, because at DePaul they were doing a 24-hour reading of my stories, and they hit you up for that, and you said sure, and they put you on first, reading this story that was like 48 minutes long, and you tell that it was so good, but I thought, I felt a little bad that they, you had to do some reading, but
it was great. I was I was really honored to get to be a part of that. That's an amazing event.
I'm glad to hear that for many reasons. And I think that was not Big Bird. I think it was probably Conan. He often gets mistaken thus. But I'm going to do Colbert next week for this book. And so I'm glad to get this exposition where I can go deep with him because he's partly responsible,
That was a crazy event, because it all culminated in singing "I'll See You Again," and the sort of session pianist was Randy Newman was playing.
Yeah. Well, they had divided everybody up, all of the into different groups, and put them into different people's offices, and kind of assigned each group someone to help kind of lead everyone through learning the song. And Katie Couric was the person in my group, being very, very adamant about everybody learning the song. And Christian Amanpour was in my group too.
Oh my God.
And it was just like this crazy energy of like, who do you think you are telling me what to do? I don't know. I don't want to spill too much tea here on this, but it was tense. Let's just put it that way. It was tense. So I was looking out of my room for someone that I was actually looking for George, honestly. I was when we found each other.
You needed your favorite humorist in that moment.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Well, that's kind of what I'm referring to in my song, "Us Dipshits Gotta Stick Together," where because it's true in any circumstance, it's the people who you can look over at and be like, this is crazy, right? Like we have our feet on the ground, and I think George said it earlier, like we understand normal life. We don't put on airs, and anytime we're given an opportunity to sing a song or write a story or an article or fall down on a stage, uh, we understand that it must be treated with the exact same amount of reverence and enthusiasm as, what the world tells us should be the big deal moments. Uh, when we attack our narratives, when we tell our stories, every opportunity might be the most important one.
Here's one. Who else from your Gumption list of heroes would you like to have a similar excursion with, and where would you take them? That's from Jordan Greco.
Oh boy. Well,
I hope the answer is nobody, because, but whatever.
yeah, how could you?
Which-
I'll tell you, I have a good answer though, and that is Yoko and Laurie Anderson.
no.
Laurie, I've talked to about there's some different cave structures in Mexico and in the American Southwest that sound just almost supernatural, incredible networks where people have built in accessibility that are in a national park sense, where you can like use staircases and be a pedestrian without doing hardcore spelunking. I'd love to go, but I would need you guys to be there too. So we'll take five of us, because imagine those two then like making noises together in caves. I mean, that would just
Amazing.
would be to
Yeah.
die for.
Yeah.
So Nick, I have a question.
Yes.
When you, I think I've been asked this question about my book, how to write one song, because it's a very clear, I guess there's a clear directive as to what that book would be about and what you'd hope someone would take away from the book. But do you have any feelings like that about this book? Do you have any, internal desire that it would make a difference in someone's life in a particular way?
I do. It's a little ephemeral, but I was thinking about it today because this book is being very well received, and I've had this is my fifth book, and they've gone pretty well. I don't think I've had a clanker or anything, and I've been pretty happy with developing my voice over five books. But this book seems like people have said to me, including you guys, have said things about how like my voice, a lot of the threads of questions that I've been asking as an adult are kind of come together in this particular tapestry. And like I got to be on, I'm just a big fan of Ezra Klein's podcast, which you guys have both been on and I've enjoyed. And it's the kind of thing that when I heard I was going to get to be on it for this book, which is out right now, I was kind of blown. I was freaked out because I have a little bit of an I'm not worthy thing. But then I had a wonderful conversation with him, and he made me feel great. And he asks the most perceptive questions, and so I'm thinking, well, I'm grateful that things have gone in a way. I mean, even that I get to be friends with you two, that happened in the first place, and then that developed. Like we're all on the right path enough that we got to go on our trip together, and we're still friends, and we love each other, and we collaborate and share our ups and downs and our peaches and pits, and it makes me really grateful that I managed to pull off this book and that it's working to the extent that it is, And so to answer your question, I hope that this book somehow, like me passing along the wisdom from teachers greater than myself, I hope that it gives someone the kind of epiphany that reading Wendell Berry's stories gave me in my 20s and made me say, oh, I mean, when I finally met Wendell and his family, I said, look, if I could just have a job communicating your writing to people, I would love that job. And it's become part of my job. Like I've done audiobooks of 2 of his essays, and I I trumpet his work all the time. And so I hope that like this book is not going to cure cancer, and I ask a lot more questions in it than I think I give answers. And so I hope that it sparks, more people's curiosities and their perceptions to awaken our society to dealing together with these issues of paying attention specifically to our food, to where our food comes from, and how we treat our farmers or mistreat our farmers. So that's my incredibly succinct answer to your question.
On that, I just noted one question. Somebody wanted to ask the same question. Where would they start with Leopold?
Well, his like white album, I guess, is a Sand County Almanac. It's a beautiful book of essays, and they cover a lot of his life. And it's sitting right over there. I haven't memorized the name of the guy. You also see a beautiful light lavender book called A Swimming Upon in the Rain.
Yeah,
I love that book.
That whole thing.
Hang on.
He just got up during his Zoom call. Dang, didn't even know you could do that.
I'm in the room
wearing pants.
I wrote so much of the book.
Free.
The Aldo Leopold, His Life and Work by Kurt Miney or Maine. This is really a beautiful book, and this is the room where I wrote a lot of the book. And there's I'm just cleaning up all the piles of like books and magazine articles, basically my book writing nest. The book's been done for quite some time, so yes, there's some procrastination.
Did you read the book there too? Did you do the audiobook there too?
No, I went into a studio. I've been doing a lot of cartoons and narration and stuff here during the pandemic, which has been a great blessing. But I prefer having someone besides me in charge of the quality of the sound. So I did a studio.
So what's going on? Like, what's the next project on the horizon for is it the Wilco album, Jeff, that's in progress and done?
We're just taking our time. I don't know, probably sometime next year. We'll have everything ready to go. But just more Wilco touring, and I think that record that I put out this year, Love is the King, is gonna get like a kind of a deluxe version of it with a whole live version of that record.
It's a great record.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Those are the songs I was sending you guys pretty much, I think.
That's amazing.
And
are you working on another book, Jeff? I know you're doing Stack, and you're doing that amazingly well. That's just like.
Yeah, I think I'm chipping away at a book, but I'm just kind of taking my time and kind of feeling out some different things to write about with the Substack that I've been doing. So
yeah.
I originally was going to write a book called How to Win at Yoga, but a spiritual guide for the competitive soul. But I don't know. We'll see. Lately, I've been kind of into those really short paragraph kind of almost memoir type entries on the Substack, and I was maybe thinking about putting them together a whole book like that.
Well, it's incredibly generous what you're doing on there. It's just a delight. I mean, God, the
Thank you.
songs and the drafts and the one song that you did when you were how old, 14 or something, or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, the flying Henry's flag.
yeah. And Nick, how about you? What's that after you get off tour? What's up?
Gosh, I'm tickled to say I have, for the first time in a while, kind of a wide open calendar. I'm doing my best. It's really hard to keep the calendar clear, which is a lucky problem. So I'm gonna try and pay a lot of attention to my wife for some months, and sneak into my wood shop and work on my ukuleles. Um, I will say at the end of this month on Netflix, I have a show starting that I'm so privileged to be on called Colin in Black and White. And it's a show, it's a 6 episode series made by Ava DuVernay and Colin Kaepernick. And it's kind of Kaepernick's origin story when he was in high school. And I was not aware that he was adopted by a white couple in Wisconsin. And they moved to Central California, and that's where he became the sports phenom that he became. And so Mary Louise Parker and I play his mom and dad, and this great kid named Jaden Michael plays Colin. And it's just, Ava DuVernay does such amazing work and is such a kick-ass muckraker. Like I have admired her for so long, and always wondered how could a potato-faced, middle-aged white guy ever be of any use to her. And she came up with an answer, so I'm really excited. That'll be on Netflix.
Great to see you.
What about you, George?
Oh, I'm just finishing up a book of stories, so I'm just gonna just stay home and work and work and work. And Paula's finishing her book, so we're just so happy to not be going anywhere and just putting in the long writing days. We have a kind of sick older dog and another younger one who just had surgery and 2 kittens. So we're just like lots to do up there. That's
Wow.
sweet time.
That's exciting. A book of new stories.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We'll see.
I learned so much from your last book, George. It was so incredible.
Man, I was so mad though. I did too. It's so beautiful. I wish that everyone, swimming in the pond in the rain. I wish I had read it in high school, because I would have then read would have fixed every English class that I was reading it.
You got the hell out of that Turgenev story, The Singers, on the audiobook. That's a beautiful, that's a tough read too, and you really brought it home.
Thank you, but I'm still angry because the timing of these things is such that I was sent the story because they were making the audiobook, and I went in and recorded the story. And then sometime later, I received the book in which George masterfully explains how to interpret the story. So I was like, oh man,
No.
I did it dumb old Offerman style.
No, you did it perfectly. It was perfect. You intuitively knew how to do it. So
that's an incredible audiobook. Keith David, holy cow. I mean, what a gorgeous instrument that guy has. Yeah,
that was really something that Kelly Gilday did the same. The person who put together the Lincoln and the Bardo one did that too, and she's a real master.
Somebody should buy her an entire horse farm.
Yes. Let me write that down.
All right. Well, I feel like we've plugged our upcoming projects. Please give my love to your families. I can't believe if you had told me that I would get to do a Zoom with you two for a cool indie store in Boston. By the way, shout out to North Bennett Street School in Boston, a school that I'm involved in supporting. The coolest, I think, oldest working trade school in the country. They have an incredible furniture program, but several others. I'm a big fan of Boston, so thank you to Brookline Books for having us.
Thank you.
And I think a young lady named Alex is going to bring this ship into shore.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Well, thank all of you so much for this. Obviously, seen in the chat, everybody has had a really wonderful time. Thank you so much to everybody who spent your evening here. And thank you again for supporting Nick and for supporting our store with your ticket purchases, your book purchases. And yeah, this was really lovely. What a great way to spend the evening. Thank you all so much.
So great to see you, George and Nick, and thank you.
You too, Jeffy. See you soon in person.
Thanks
Good
for
night,
having me.
everyone.